So once again, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Nenad Filipovic and I'm in charge of executive education here at IDC Bled School of Management. And part of our executive education, of course, is the GMP program. Today's session is devoted to it. I'll make a short introduction, use a few slides, and then I will pass the word to our dear professor, Salman Mafti, who will talk briefly on one of the topics that he covers within the GMP program. We'll have then a short conversation with one of our current participants, Byron Truscott, and with a bit of practical advice from Simon, our marketing person, and give some space also for your questions. So if you allow me, I will start sharing the presentation and just walk you briefly through a few notions. As said, I think overall, I introduced my colleagues. Overall, it will take us about 1 hour and a few minutes before the questions, and then depending on your questions, a few minutes more. To start with, why do we have the GMP and how do we see it as part of our program offering? Its name is already saying a lot, General Management Program. It is for people who, of course, to support careers. That's the idea of our participants. We have a number of programs that follow the career development from the early days, Young Managers Program, which is for people who just started their managerial career. But then at one stage, managers rise above the functional level. They come to the level where they have to get the overview of the overall organization, how it functions as a whole. And that's the point where general management program really becomes interesting because it allows to integrate your own thinking into the overall organizational thinking and become more effective from the holistic perspective. It is also serving as an introductory step because the next possible program to follow up with is the Executive MBA, which is, of course, in case somebody wants to get much deeper and even broader insight into management thinking and get more competencies as a manager. Now, as I said, GMP participants are managers. We occasionally have also experts who are already in senior expert position and typically also getting ready to take over managerial responsibilities. They have experience. They, on average, in the class, average years of work experience is 15, which basically means that with, let's say, 30, 40 people in the classroom, it builds up to several hundred years of business experience in the classroom, which can serve as a good reference. I think that participants learn from each other as much as they learn from the professors. And our faculty, professors' role is to guide this discussion, structure it, give some input, of course, but also bring this experience into action. What also helps is the diversity, both in terms of the backgrounds in geographical terms, always a number of countries present, but also industries, very different ones, service, manufacturing, roles within the organizations. We have people from R&D, from marketing, from finance, and also gender diversity, making it a nice group of people that can not only learn from each other, but also hopefully build network and have some fun. Now, we know that people at that stage in the career are busy. It's not easy to set aside time for the program, but we have decided to design it in a modular fashion so that we don't request presence in one big block of time. Each module takes 1 week, but that week is quite intense. And during that week, it is recommended to plan not to have much of business obligations. We allow for start of the program at any point of it. In other words, one can start at the beginning of week 1 or at the beginning of week 2 or 3 or 4, because the program is designed in such a way that it does not depend on having already completed some parts in order to start with the others. So we have completed the enrollments already for the April, of course, we are now in May. So we are now having open enrollments for people who want to start either in June or possibly later this year. During the pandemics, it's difficult to predict how things develop. In the last year and a half, we have gone through all different modes of delivery. So under normal circumstances, of course, we would prefer to have it here in Bled. You can't see through the window of my office, but you can imagine it's a beautiful scenery. Our school is extremely well equipped, also a very convenient place of learning, a beautiful one. So it has advantages of bringing people both of the beauty of the site and also of the personal networking that can be established. However, if that is not possible, we can run it in fully online mode, or as we actually at the moment run our MBA program in a hybrid mode, where some people attend in the classroom, while others who cannot travel can join online. We cover a number of topics, and it's intentional. We try to cover, keeping in mind two principles. One is that for people at that level of management, we believe that three streams of performance quality are needed. That people are good in their professional performance. In other words, not only that they are able to excel in their own profession, being finance or marketing or operations or name it, but that they can also talk professional language of their colleagues, so that when marketing people talk to finance, they can share the basic language, the basic terminology, understand each other well enough. So one is this professional level, and you can see topics, customers and markets, and measuring organization performance, which is all about numbers, or developing competitive advantage, which is actually now moving us into the second territory, and that territory is business. So if one is professional competencies, the other is business, generalistic competencies, strategy, creating and delivering value to the customers. And then, of course, finally, the third one, extremely important one, is about people, leading people. And as you can see, we have a number of things. We have leading people as a course, we have leading change, we have arts and leadership, because we think leaders can learn a lot from arts. And then as an integrative component, we have what we call individual GMP project, where participants come with a topic which is their actual managerial issue that they face at their job, a strategic problem that they have, which they would like to resolve, and then working together with a mentor, which the school gives. That person works over the period of all 4 modules to prepare a structured analysis and come with a proposal of the solution, and also the implementation plan with all the elements, with understanding of all the risks associated, the actions needed, and presents this project both to the mentor and in own organization. So as I said, a number of different topics, all of them elevating the competencies for people who are coming to that level of managerial positions. That, of course, requires specific way of learning. It's very interactive. We are not a typical academic university type school. We are pragmatic. Of course, we base everything on great theory, but we make it applicable. We are very proud that people who learn in our school use that learning next day at their job. We learn from each other. We learn from case studies, concrete examples from real life. We work in groups as much as we work together in the classroom. Groups change. We have various exercises, role playing. In short, it's stimulating, it's intense. It's also an opportunity for everybody to learn by making mistakes in a risk-free environment, which I think is much easier to do than if we have to learn by making mistakes at our job. We think we are one of the best schools in Europe, one of the best places for executive learning in Europe. And if we have to summarize in very few words, why would somebody come to us? First of all, because it's not just learning, it's learning, but it's also kind of experience which allows for a deeper learning. You know, knowledge is a byproduct of learning. Knowledge can be also received from the books or from the internet in its narrowest shape. But learning in broader sense means also learning more than knowledge and skills. It also means having an insight into own attitudes and working on changing these attitudes. Now, this program is a short one, but it is an intense experience which allows for this transformational process of making oneself a better match. It is built on innovative thinking, on the cutting edge, in management thinking. It's also built on cutting edge in pedagogy, in the way we learn. It allows people to bond together and creates a network for life. We know that our alumni stay connected. I'll say in a moment about the spread of our alumni network. And the whole process allows not only to learn, but also to feel nice. The staff is pleasant, the school is beautiful. And even if learning has to be done over internet, which these days is for many of us a reality, we get extremely high evaluations of the platform we use and the learning experience over internet. By the way, I guess Byron will also say later a word or two on that. I mentioned alumni, people who go through our longer programs, including the GMP, but also MBA, for example, are organized in national alumni clubs or regional alumni clubs. We have people from more than 70 countries that went through our own programs. We have 15 clubs being active. These people cooperate with each other. They explore business opportunities with each other, or just have nice events, or if necessary, to get an advice, pick phone and call a colleague and get either a practical piece of advice or at least an opportunity to talk freely with someone. I would like to pass the word now to Professor Mufti. Salman has been with us for many years. Actually, I think Salman is more than 20, if I'm not wrong. And he teaches in various areas, but in this particular program, he teaches on strategy. And he will now have a short, unfortunately, we have to make it short, although I'm sure we would all benefit from much more of the input here, but a short input on strategic decision-making, just to make you feel a bit the taste of how it looks in the program. So Salman, may I pass now the word to you.
Thank you very much, Nenad, and good afternoon, everybody. And the fact that I'm in Canada, I should be saying good morning to everybody, because it is still morning here. Thank you so much for attending this session. It's a delight to be here with you. As Nenad mentioned, I've been associated with IEDC for more than 20 years. And this is the last year, and this year probably are going to be the first 2 years that I have not visited BLED in person. So as Nenad mentioned, I just want to give you a bit of a flavor of what I do in this program. I teach a module called Developing Competitive Advantage, which is about strategy. And you know, Nenad mentioned giving a bit of a flavor, and that's what I'm going to try to do over the next 20 minutes. Besides giving you a bit of a flavor of what's it like to be in a class in the GMP program, I also want to give you a useful framework, something that you can perhaps use right away. I'm going to share my slides here. So if you just give me a second while I set this up. And just take you through a few slides, a few concepts. The session that I'm going to talk about over the next few minutes is called Strategic Decision Making. And I often start this particular session within the module by saying that some of you are probably wondering, what can a professor who works at a university tell me about making decisions? That the fact that you've been making decisions all your professional life. And I think that's a valid point. But what I'd like to submit is that because we're so natural at making decisions, we often don't think about how do we actually make them. And so a point of this particular session is to give you a chance to reflect a little bit about how you make a decision, and perhaps is there a way to improve it. Now, decision-making is absolutely important within strategy, because in strategy, we are making decisions all the time. In fact, I would even take a bigger step back and say that when it comes to making important decisions, really, we can put them in three big buckets. One is this idea of making decisions about strategy, about the business. The other type of decision that nowadays we seem to be making a lot of is crisis decision making. So when you don't have a lot of time and you have a lot of turbulence around you. And then, of course, as Nina mentioned, another key aspects of management and business is people. So we have to make decisions about people. What I do want to focus is a bit on strategy. So what is strategy? And as you probably know, that there are many, many definitions out there, many different ways of thinking about strategy. But if we were to pull back and look at strategy in its most simplest form, one way to think about this is, put simply, strategy is about where do you want to go and how do you want to get there. And even though this definition is rather simple, it's actually quite profound, because it is saying is that you have to establish some form of direction. And that's very key. But the other thing it's also saying is that you have to have the ability to actually implement it. What good is a great strategy if you cannot actually execute it? So it's both about establishing a direction and also making sure that you have the means to achieve that direction. Now, let's link strategy to decision making. I would argue that there is a strong link between strategy and making decisions, because when it comes to strategy, we often find that managers, professionals, executives have to make three really important decisions. And these decisions are all about establishing focus, making sure that you can establish that direction and that execution. So what are those three important decisions that you have to make? Now, these decisions are important in the sense that they're also very difficult. The least difficult of them is the decision about what we should start doing. There are all kinds of things available to us nowadays in terms of opportunities. Think of new technologies, think of globalization. And then you start thinking about, what markets should I go into? What new product or service can I launch? So there are all kinds of things that you have to make a decision about that you want to start doing, something new. The second decision that you have to make is a little bit more difficult. And that is, what should we not do? Because there's so many opportunities out there, there's a tendency to take on too much. And what we have found working with organizations over all these years is that organizations that take on, say, 5 or 6 big things to do in a year, new things, tend not to do a good job with any of them. But organizations that take on, maybe 1, 2, maximum 3 things in a year, they tend to do a much better job. So a big part of strategy is saying no, because there's so many things coming at you. If you took on everything, you'll simply overwhelm yourself. So that's a more difficult decision, is saying no to all kinds of opportunities. The third decision that you have to make is an even more difficult one, and that is, what should we stop doing? Many years ago, it was a good idea to do something. It made sense back then, but we found out that it's not working. Maybe the customer demand is not there. Maybe we don't have the right skill or whatever. But for some reason, we do not stop that particular initiative. Maybe we like the people who are doing it or whatever, but in any case, it simmers on, it sucks away energy and managerial attention and finances from the organization. So this is a strong link between strategy and making decisions. So let's then go right to decision making. Now, most of you have made big decisions in your life. Think about a decision that you made recently or many, many years ago, and ask yourself, how did you make that important decision? Now, when I often ask this in class, in the module that I teach here, I get quite a list from people. I get a list in terms of all the things that they do when they're actually making a decision. Now, let me give you a little sense of the list that I get. Some people will say, I try to define the problem, whatever the issue might be. For example, revenues are down, or there's higher employee turnover. I try to figure out, why is that happening? Why are revenues down? Why are employees leaving the organization? Others will say that I come up with a set of decision criteria. I look at objectives of the organization. Think of cost as being an important criterion. Others will say that I also, prioritize the criteria, because certain criteria are more important than others. I also hear that I develop options or alternatives. I could do this, I could do that. Then, of course, people will say I try to match the alternatives against the criteria and evaluate it and see which is the best possible alternative to go with, and then I select it. So this is what we tend to call the rational decision-making approach, which makes sense, it's logical, it's linear, and looks like it's something that a lot of people claim that they do. But then I asked the question, do managers actually make decisions this way? And the way that we look at this is that we observe managers like you. We come and try to get a sense of, how do you actually make a decision? And we find that we don't see this. I usually include this cartoon in my class here. In this cartoon, you'll see a big meeting is over, and two guys are having a sidebar. Two people are having a sidebar. In fact, one is whispering to the other. And he's saying is that, we did a Pareto analysis, a grid analysis, a decision tree, something even called a force field analysis. And then the boss decided to go with his gut. And I'm sure some of you have seen something like this, where, all kinds of due diligence has been done, all kinds of analyses have been developed and presented to the executives. And then the executives make a decision that tend to go against what was being recommended. And you'd have to sort of wonder what's really going on in here. Well, you sort of think that maybe the boss or the executives know something that we don't know. And that would be a fair comment, because maybe they have access to information that we don't have. Maybe they're more sensitive to the political climate of the organization or the industry that we're not familiar with. Maybe they have way more experience than we do, and they have seen something like this before, and therefore they're using that as a way of making a decision. Maybe they have access to confidential information. So there are many, many reasons out there. But often what happens when something like this goes on in an organization, and I'm sure you've seen this, a couple of dysfunctionalities occur. Number one is that we all say, let's figure out what the boss has already decided, and let's present information to the boss that supports the decision that he or she has already made. Or the second dysfunctionality is that we say, the decision's already made and the process is really in place so that we can provide our input and make it feel like as if, we're part of it, and then they can get our buy-in, because not only they want to make a good decision, they want to make sure that they implement that decision. But there may be something else going on in here, and that is the actual sort of process of decision making. So what I'd like to do over the next just few minutes is try to break it down a bit in terms of what do we think might be going on. Now, as you probably know, that there are fundamentally two ways of making a decision, which I've tried to highlight. One is this idea of taking an analytical, rational approach. And the other is much more of what we call an intuition or instinctive or a gut feel based kind of an approach. The first one, analysis, as we teach in a business school, we talk about it at work. It sounds like it's a sort of a science-based approach, and it makes sense. The other one, intuition, is something difficult to teach in a business school. How do you teach intuition in an educational environment? Yet, it is something that is practiced all the time in organizations. So let's see if we can make sense of it and come up with a framework that blends the two. Well, let's talk a little bit about analysis for a second. I'd like to say that analysis is good. Analysis makes sense. It is a logical, systematic process for solving problems or implementing desired goals. You take a big problem, you break it down into little pieces. Often we find analysis can be done in two ways. One is what we call quantitative analysis. If you have numbers, you can take those numbers, put them in a spreadsheet, or use some sort of a framework to make sense of it. Or we have something called qualitative analysis, things that are not numbers, that you can not sort of quantify. What do you do with that? You categorize them. So think of the very famous business framework called the SWOT framework, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you can actually take a number of factors and structure them that way, and then use that as a way of making sense of it. Analysis also helps you uncover cues and patterns. If you have lots of data, by itself, the data may not make sense, but if you can use some sort of a way of organizing that data, it will give you some insights that perhaps you wouldn't have looking at that raw data. And then, of course, you can use analysis as a way of evaluating the different alternatives and options that you have. Now, analysis is good, but there's a problem with analysis, and that is too much analysis. In fact, the biggest fear most managers and executives have is the fear of making the wrong decision. And in order to mitigate against that fear, what do? We do more analysis. And what happens is that when you do too much analysis, you tend to paralyze yourself. And often what happens is that you don't make a decision, or you revert back to the status quo. So the other approach to making decisions is intuition. Intuition is basically non-conscious thinking. It happens really, really quickly, maybe in 2 seconds or less. And it's not magic. It is probably based on our past experience and all the knowledge that we have developed in school, at work, at a personal level here. It is just a very fast and a quick and dirty way of accessing that knowledge, as I said, in a couple of seconds. What is happening nowadays is that intuition is becoming even more important. When I first started teaching at IEDC 20 years ago, many managers would say to me that I don't have enough information to make a decision. Over the past 6 years, I've been teaching there. What I hear is something very different, and that is I have way too much information available to me. In fact, a lot of the information is conflicting, and it really paralyzes me. So I use intuition a lot more nowadays than I used to. And then, of course, even if the information is good, it has a shelf life. And therefore, you have to act upon it. And, if you don't act upon it, you might lose the window of opportunity. So intuition makes great sense. The problem, though, is that when we over-rely on intuition, we become susceptible to a number of psychological and behavioral flaws. For example, past experience is relevant today. And in many cases it is, but think of what's happening over the last year or so with the pandemic. It has created an environment that, most of us, in fact, all of us have not seen before. So how do we make sense of a situation that we have not seen before? What happens often is that when we over-rely on intuition during a time of turbulence and uncertainty, we actually get ourselves into a lot of trouble. So here's the dilemma. On one hand, we know that analysis is good, but we also know that too much analysis can paralyze us. We also know that intuition is good and it's practical and it's used all the time, but we also have learned that an over-reliance on intuition can get you into some trouble. So what is one to do? Well, besides teaching, I do some research as well. And one of the things I've been doing over the past 15 years or so is studying managers, not only in Canada and the United States, but also in Europe, in Asia, and trying to make sense of how do they actually make decisions. So I actually studied, managers who were considered to be very, very good decision makers by their peers, by their subordinates and everybody. And what I thought I'd do is I share with you what I found. So I'm going to switch to a little notepad here and put up together a little model that I see successful managers use making decisions. What happens is that whenever a successful manager faces a problem, and I'm going to use the word problem in a positive sense, it's not just an issue, but it could be an opportunity. Think of the problem that your customer has that needs to be solved. They say to me, these successful decision makers, is that I teach them that they should start off with analysis. And they say that's not natural to them. What's natural to them is to have an intuition. They say to me that you cannot stop me from having an intuition. And they're right, I cannot stop you from having an intuition. But what's interesting, obviously, is that they knew that turning that intuition into a decision is not a good thing. They sort of have this sense that, just an over-reliance on intuition and turning into a decision would not be a good thing. So what did they do? Well, they all do the exact same thing. And let me show you what they do. What I found that successful decision makers take this route. They go this way, then they go this way, and then they go this way. And then I realized what this is. You know what this is? This is arguably the most important framework ever devised by humankind. I jokingly say that, not because I came up with it, because this fundamentally is based on something that we call the scientific method. When a scientist observes a phenomenon, he or she does not come up with a theory. He or she comes up with a hypothesis. And fundamentally, your intuition is your hypothesis. And a good scientist will not force their hypothesis into theory. What they will do is collect data, run experiments, in fact, do their level best to try and reject their hypothesis. And if they cannot do that, then they'll say, we've got something. If you reframe your intuition as a hypothesis, a wonderful thing happens. And that is you allow yourself to be wrong. So the idea here is that whenever you're facing a problem, whether it's a strategic problem, a crisis problem, or a people problem, you're going to have an intuition, whether you like it or not. Let's use it. But then what you do is that you validate that intuition with analysis. Let me switch back to my slides here and share with you a framework that I've developed that I share with all the managers that I teach. Whenever you have a problem, ask yourself, what's my intuition? But then reframe your intuition as a hypothesis or as just simply your first alternative. Then ask yourself, what other alternatives can I generate? And I like to sort of tell people a rule of 3 to 5 alternatives. Less than 3 becomes a go, no-go situation. More than 5 becomes a rather unwieldy. So 3 to 5 alternatives. And then ask yourself, what are the criteria? Here, the rule of thumb is about 2 or 3 criteria. Certainly, there are many, many more things that are important, but if you do that, it becomes very difficult to try and gauge the alternatives against the criteria. Then do an evaluation. You can do a formal evaluation like a decision table, or you can just have a discussion and kick around these alternatives against the criteria and see which one makes sense. And then you make a decision. Now, this particular framework is what I like to call the ACE framework. It's an easy acronym to remember. And the idea here is that you start off with your intuition and then you validate it with analysis. So this is a wonderful, a very simple way of thinking about it. You can apply this at a strategy level, as I said, or even right down to an operational level on a day-to-day decision making. So this, I hope, gave you a bit of a flavor of what's it like to be in a class in the GMP program. Certainly, when we are in class, it's much more interactive. I stop every few minutes. People ask questions, people make comments, they challenge me, they challenge each other, and we create a very sort of very interactive and a very engaging type of an environment. And it's not only learning, but it's also a lot of fun. So with that, I thank you for taking this session. I'm going to hand it back to Ninad for the rest of the session.
Thank you very much, Salman, and thank you for this interesting input. as we said, it's good to hear from a professor and get a taste for the kind of things we are talking about in our program. But being a practitioner, I also very much believe into the power of first-hand experience and evidence. And that's why I'm so glad that we have with us. And I will skip the very official introduction of Dr. Byron Truscott, because in class we refer to each other on first name basis. So Byron, thank you for joining us. And maybe as a start, you work at Treibacher, and I'm pretty sure that not everybody knows what kind of a company Treibacher is. So maybe if just you give us a very brief introduction of the company and your role in the company.
Sure. Hi, Leonard. Thanks for the invitation to join you this afternoon. So, as you mentioned, I work for a company in Austria, in Carinthia, called Treibacher, and it's a chemical firm. So I'm a chemist by training, and we have a number of business units doing different work. The business unit that I work for is involved in environmental catalysts. So we develop catalysts for pollution abatement. So probably what's most familiar to people is pollution from cars. So every car has a set of catalysts in its exhaust that removes the noxious gases, things like hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, nitrous oxide, greenhouse gases. So we develop the catalysts that remove those noxious gases, and it's cars, it's factories, it's anything with an exhaust basically needs some sort of gas emission control. So I'm the research and development manager for that business unit.
Thanks. So not only an expert chemist, but also managing the R&D processes in your unit. Can you tell us where are you now in the flow of the GMP program?
So I'm 3/4 of the way through. I started in autumn last year, and yeah, I've got a week to go.
Yeah, well, glass half full. I mean, or unfortunately, the beautiful thing coming closer to an end. That's the way we see it. If you can still recall the days when you were about to join the program, any reflection on what actually made you join, and even if you were suggested by your company, why are we GMP here at IDC?
So I wasn't suggested by my company. I actually sought IDC out because I'm based in Austria and I'm a non-first language German speaker. Before I took this job, I was in the R&D team, but more as a project manager, and I was looking for a formal course on project management, and I kind of stumbled across the IEDC because I was looking for project management courses in English. So in 2019, I did the project management course with Nicholas Wake. And luckily back then it was still in person in Bled, and it was an absolutely fantastic course, very interactive, very energetic, just everything about it was exactly what I was looking for. So when I got offered the job to take over the R&D team at my company, one of my stipulations was that I got sent to IEDC to do the full GMP program.
Great. And expectations met? Or how do you find the program, the intensity of it, the impact it makes for you up to now?
Absolutely, it's met my expectations. It was so back then when I was still sort of thinking about it and wondering if it was the right thing to do. My only concern was that I was doing it too early in my management career, and that I hadn't built up the experience in management that I needed. But after chatting to you and chatting to Drikas about joining the program, I kind of my mind was made up, and I joined the program. it's absolutely met my expectations. There's so many different factions to it and different areas, and what I've found is that every course that I've done has been different and offered me something in a slightly different way. So and it's when you're in the course, it's a huge amount of information that's thrown at you, and it takes time afterwards, you know, for the next sort of few weeks, you'll go back and you'll look at notes and you'll absorb more from it, and you'll reflect on things that you learned but maybe didn't fully absorb during the class. So it follows you for some time.
Yeah, great, thanks. It's interesting for me just to reflect on your reflection. One thing which I hear is actually this double loop learning, that one gets exposed to certain things as you were exposed in the classroom, very different, new things, new concepts, and it's fine. But then the real learning happens once you go back and say, oops, maybe I can try this, and then try and reflect on how it works and so on. So thanks. I think it's one of the things which we try to do, but I'm very glad to hear it from you. I mentioned earlier that I'm sure that the content is great, but it's also, every learning is also influenced by participants, by people who are in it. Now, you come from a technical background. Some of your colleagues, I guess, also. I don't know that I guess. I know also some are very different. How do you find this chemistry among different people working? And by the way, as we said, we let people come in different stages of the program, so it's kind of fluctuation is there. Is it good? Does it work?
It works very well. It's when you get into some of the discussions, and you can kind of, and something that you learn over the program is how to give an example from Salman's course, talking about things like intuition, and when you have people from different backgrounds and with completely different perspectives, and you have these discussions in class about making different decisions, you kind of realize the richness of the participants that are in this program. And so, you know, I could be sitting in a group talking between myself, who is South African but living in Austria, with a Swiss colleague and a Slovenian colleague, and a Croatian colleague, and we all sort of have very different perspectives, and it generates very interesting discussions.
By the way, you mentioned as a South African, did you expect to find a South African professor living in Bled?
Absolutely not.
I don't know if I had any opportunity to socialize with Rikus. He's a very sociable person, but yeah, we just for our audience, we have a professor. Actually, the dean of our business school is a South African professor of leadership, Rikus Creek. So now you come with a very specific background. I mean, a person with top professional expertise becoming a manager, and in a way changing the profession, if you want. Some other people come with very different backgrounds, maybe more linear, a young marketing person becoming a marketing manager, and then a more senior marketing manager. And then, do you feel that the GMP is for a broad audience? I mean, does it take into account that people come with different profiles? Does it allow people to kind of come to a common level of conversation? Did you have any problems of that kind in the classroom?
I think so. I mean, like I said, every course, you obviously take different things away from every course, and some of them will obviously be more applicable to you than others. But I mean, I'm 3/4 of the way through, and I'm yet to do a course where I wasn't really enriched by it. And every course is kind of taught at a level that I think anyone anywhere in their career could learn from it. I mean, it really talks of the quality of the lecturers that you bring in, and when you I'm going to single out Salman again because the participants would have just got a taste of his course. But when you sit in Salman's course, you get the feeling that it's not someone who's talking out of a book. Like, you couldn't read the stuff that he's teaching. It's obviously a lifetime of knowledge that he's generated, and that goes for all of your lecturers. I'd say the quality of the lecture and the knowledge that they bring is I think something that anyone in their career could benefit from.
When you look ahead, when you think about the next challenges you will be facing at your company, is there anything particular that you believe GMP will help you with?
Well, actually, so we had our last week, what was it, two or 3 weeks ago, and it was split into the strategy component, and then an accounting component. And about 3 days after I finished that course, we had to present our strategy to the board of directors. So it was actually perfectly in time. What's really been beneficial for me, and will be beneficial for me over the next few years, is kind of the emotional intelligence aspect to being a manager. So the stuff that I've learned from you and from Salman and from Dricus, like I said, stuff that you can't read in a book, stuff that you really have to experience firsthand, that makes you a better team leader.
Now, I don't want to create any embarrassment, because the two of us know the details of it, but there is a component in the program which we call GMP project, and it's a bit challenging. Any words on how you see the project helping you?
So it's very good at forcing you to kind of use what you've learned, and I'm finding that now, that when you kind of start your project, you go back and you look through your notes, and you use kind of tactics that you've learned during the course, whether it's accounting or planning strategies, stuff like that. It's tough because, you know, we're all busy, and we have you finish the course, and you finish a section of the course, and you go back to your work, and your project gets put to one side because there's always something that's more important. And when I started the course, all the advice was start the project as early as you can, because time goes quickly. And I guess you're laughing at me because you know the position I'm in. I guess a lot of people end up in the same position, that it gets put to the back of your mind, and before you realize that your course is nearly over and you have to present your project.
Yeah. Well, but I guess, I mean, it's only normal. We prioritize things in life, and it will be completed, of course. And by the way, just for the audience, I think that having a mentor with some experience that you can rely on getting feedback from is helpful. And more you come close to the end of the project, that feedback becomes even more, I would say, supportive, in order to bring it to the right end. You're one of these, unfortunately, one of these participants who tasted different forms of delivery. You were with us for Nick's program, face-to-face. You now had a full online one. How would you comment the online experience? Was it worth? Does it make sense? Should people postpone their education for the times when hopefully this will be over, or it was actually something that created value for you?
it definitely did create value, and I think over the last year, the way that you've delivered it has gotten a lot better. So for me, your decision to break it into 1 week components was absolutely the right decision, because it's tough when it's online. When you start out, you have to be incredibly disciplined, because whether you're sitting at home or you decide to do it in your office, you'll invariably be on your work computer and have access to your work emails, and your work phone is sitting right next to you. And at the beginning of the week, you're incredibly disciplined and focused. But as the week wears on and your emails pile up and your work piles up in the background, it gets more and more difficult to stay focused. So last autumn, I had 2 weeks fully online. And by the end of it, it was really tough to stay focused. This year we did 1 week, and now we have a nice long break, and then another week, and that's been much better, much easier to digest, and also much easier from a work perspective. You know, asking your boss for 1 week off to go and study is always easier than asking for 2 weeks off in a block to study. So it's worked very well. It's still very interactive. It's just unfortunate that it's a fact that the kind of the personal element is gone, because when you're in Bled and you every hour or two you take a coffee break and you meet more and more people on the course, and you get to chat to the lecturer. Unfortunately, that aspect is kind of gone, but it's also getting better as people learn to use the system more, and we chat more online. And my hope is that next month we'll be able to meet together in Bled.
Well, as things go now, and I do hope they will go in that direction further, we are in the hybrid mode, which means that whoever is allowed to travel, because some companies don't allow for travel, and some countries make it very difficult to travel. Slovenia is opening up gradually. One can come to our school having a PCR test and then be present face to face with all the precaution measures, of course. So yes, Byron, hopefully in June we will again enjoy your company here physically in Bled, and a coffee at the terrace is always a good proposal. Thank you very much for being with us in this short conversation and sharing your experience. Thank you once again. And may I invite Simon Kramaric, or Simon. Actually, Simon, how are people calling you in English-speaking countries? Simon or Simon?
Depends. I do answer to Simon, I do answer to Simon, I do answer to Simon. So anything that kind of makes sense, I will answer to it. It comes from the experience living abroad for many years, and so people are calling me in different ways. But generally, Simon, I think it's the most common.
Okay, I'll just. I know you have prepared one short slide. I'll just share it for everybody to see it. A few words on. If the interest is there, how to proceed?
Yes, so let me just start by thanking everyone for joining us today. As you can see, and as you probably understood, the program is intended for people with a certain amount of experience. It is especially meant for experts in the fields other than business, like, for example, Byron, that are leading projects or other people. Those profiles will get the most of the GMP, which does not necessarily mean that other profiles cannot join or fully benefit from the program. And this is where basically I can help and discuss with you personally if it would make sense for you to join or your colleagues to participate, or any other program that might be more suitable for you. So my contact will be shared a little bit later. What is also important, as you can see, is a certain level of English, because most of the panel of our professors are not from Slovenia, and they're foreign experts basically in their respective fields. So if you would like to speak more about a program, I would encourage you to reach out to me and or you can actually proceed directly with the application process, and then that will put you kind of in touch with the team here at IDC. The application process, as you see, is very straightforward. Basically, we have a link online that you fill your information, some details, and then what happens is that there's a short interview with one of the professors. Usually it's with Nenad, and this is where we kind of test the level of your English and a little bit of your motivation actually to participate. So just to confirm, we are accepting applications up to the start of the third module, which is in October, and then the second module is starting now in June. That's basically it. So it's as you can see, it's quite straightforward. There's a bit of experience that is required, and obviously the language. I think we have maybe a few more minutes left for questions. Now you can see my details. So basically, you can shoot me an email, you can call me, or you can actually reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm available, and we can schedule like a meeting, a short Zoom call or something. And if you're here in Slovenia, I would be very happy to visit you as well at your premises. So maybe now, if you have any questions, you can, I guess you can type that in the chat. It would be good if you say to whom the question is meant for, if we, for example, have not touched upon something or explained something in detail enough. So that will be all from my side, and I'm looking forward to talking with you personally, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Simon. And as said, any questions just in the Q&A. We all know that the interactive platforms like Zoom, they allow for communication, they allow for asking questions, and the turnaround time is a little bit longer than in face-to-face environment. So if there's anything you are interested in, either ask now or send an email either to Simon or to myself. We will gladly answer. Yeah, so if anything pops to your mind, and so basically if you want to learn more about what kind of courses are there, I mean, Nenad, you gave a beautiful presentation at the beginning, but I know that people will try to digest this, and so everyone is invited to and encouraged to reach out. That's why we're here, and we're happy to help. Okay, so I think we have deadlines about the application. So the deadline, basically, as it was mentioned, the module is in 4 weeks' time, and we allow this year to start basically the program either in the first week, which is in April, or in the second week, which is in June, and in the last week, which is in October, the third week. So you're free to start your application process up to the start of the third module, which is in October. So basically, you can apply today, or you can wait a little bit. But if you want to start with the second module, which is in June, then I encourage you to start with the application soon. The application process will take a little bit. So we need to schedule the interview and take you forward. So maybe give a bit of time before the module starts. Take that into consideration. And another question from Elena is any particular specific cost advantage for former students of YMP program? I will leave that for face-to-face discussion, or let's say direct discussion between Simon and Elena. So well, let me say this: we have obviously the program has its price, because obviously you can see that there are like big experts that are coming to join us for this, and they provide the knowledge. And obviously it takes a lot of resources to do this. But if you are starting the program with the first module, and even later on, there's a certain early bird price, that you can take advantage of. And to answer Elena's questions directly, we always take care of our own, meaning if you are alumni, we will take a step towards you to join us again, because if you've been here, you know the quality, we know you,
let's grow together further. So that's our kind of like the idea.
Thank you very much for these explanations. If there are no other questions, let me thank you all. Salman, all the best to Canada. I hope to see you soon. Byron, same. I hope to see you in June. And I do hope this was an interesting session, not only from learning something about the decision making, but also getting a better feeling what our GMP is all about. And I do wish we see some of you who attended this short webinar also for the whole program here in Bled. Thank you all, and goodbye to everybody.
Thank you.